I born?" "Why, Frederick, you know that," said his grandmother. "You were born about 6 years ago." But Frederick didn't want to know about when he was born. He wanted to know exactly. "When was my birthday?" he asked. "Why do you want to know?" "Because everyone else knows. Edward knows, and Philip knows, and Mr. Lee knows, and—" "That's different," Grandmother Bailey said shortly. "They're white. Maybe I could ask someone." His grandmother was sewing. Now she put down her sewing. She leaned forward. "Listen to me, Frederick," she said, "and listen sharp." Her voice was very stern. "You will ask no one. Do you hear? You are a slave, Frederick. Remember that. You are a slave, and slaves don't need birthdays." Frederick Augustus Washington Bailey was born in the state of Maryland sometime in February 1817. He never knew the exact date, for he was born a slave. He was owned by another man. Frederick was owned by a man named Captain Aaron Anthony. The slaves called him Old Master. Old Master owned Frederick's mother, too, but Frederick hardly remembered her at all. Soon after Frederick was born, Old Master sent Frederick's mother away. He sent the baby Frederick to live with Grandmother Bailey. Grandmother's cabin was only a tumble-down shack in the little town of Tuckahoe. It had no real floor, just the bare earth. It had no windows at all. But to Frederick it was home, because his grandmother was there. Those were the happy years, the first years with Grandmother Bailey. Frederick wanted them to go on forever, but he knew they would not. He knew that Grandmother Bailey only raised children until they were old enough to work. Then they were sent back to Old Master again. Leave his grandmother? The thought scared Frederick. "Maybe Old Master will forget about me," he thought. "I'm awfully skinny and small." But he was growing. Frederick could remember a time when he had not been able to touch the bottom branch of the pine tree beside the cabin, no matter how hard he stretched. Now he had to bend his head when he walked under it. "Maybe if I don't eat so much," Frederick thought, "I'll stop growing." But soon he got hungry. Nothing helped anyway. Time kept passing, and Frederick kept growing. One morning his grandmother called, "Frederick, where are you? Hurry, child. We're going on a trip." A trip? Frederick came running. Once he had gone through the woods to Mr. Lee's sawmill. He had been down river as far as the next farm, but he had never gone on a real trip before. He danced up and down with excitement. His feet kicked up little puffs of dust. He was far too excited to be worried. "Where?" he cried. But Grandmother just shook her head. "You'll see," was all she would say. Frederick and his grandmother walked for a long time. The road was dusty and the day was hot. Frederick's feet began to drag. Finally they came to the end of their trip. Frederick saw a big brick house. Behind the house was a barn and many smaller buildings. Later Frederick learned that these were slave quarters, where the slaves lived, the storehouses and shops. Fields of corn and tobacco stretched as far as he could see. "Where are we, Grandma?" he whispered. "They call this big house farm," she answered. "Who lives there?" Frederick pointed to the brick house. "Old Master," Grandmother said quietly. "No." Frederick pulled back on his grandmother's hand. "Let's go home," he cried. But Grandmother shook her head. She held Frederick's hand tightly and kept on walking toward the brick house.